Again, welcome to Andrew. Congratulations on the publication of the book. And I think we'll just get going by having Andrew just very briefly introduce the sort of central concept or conception of the book.
Well, thanks very much. I don't know if there's a central concept. As Seth said, it's kind of four different things. It's neither fish, nor a fowl, nor a mammal, nor a reptile. It's certainly the kind of book that I think a lot of agents would say, no, I can't really do anything with this. We don't even know where to put it. But it began accidentally enough. Like my time here, I had started as a Fulbright professor in 2011 in Bratislava and just kind of landed here. And it wasn't really planned, and it evolved into a full-time activity, and now I'm deeply embedded, I think, in Czech life. But I think the personal memoir part of it, at least the opening, and I'm going to read short excerpts from I think about 6 different chapters, because the book is a journal style and it goes from 2011 to 2023. And so I thought just following that pattern, because it does sort of begin with my personal story of sort of being dragged kicking and screaming into this culture. I was not so happy with Czech or Slovak life at first. It was a bit of a learning exercise. And then as that was happening, I realized there's more to this region, and it's very closely tied together than just Czechia and Slovakia, and I began searching for connections. And I love to travel. It's been my disease all my life. I just can't stay still, so I just love to explore. But then stuff started happening, and I guess as the last sentence of the intro says, then plague descended, followed by war. So I think that's about all to say for an introduction, and then
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it really is a chronicle of the last 14, 15 years of contemporary history, and a kind of really detailed mapping of the region. So it really functions in different ways. I just wanted to ask, just before you read us some excerpts, did you have any, as you started the project, did you have any kind of models in mind? I don't know how much we know about Andrew's background, but he comes out of the Mark Twain scholarly tradition. Were you thinking Innocents Abroad, or what was kind of the conception?
I was thinking more Patrick Lee Fermor, who at that time was really inspiring me. And in fact, the Bratislava, one of the Bratislava chapters, he's there with me in Bratislava while I'm there with him going across Austria and coming to Bratislava. So I think he especially, I am like him, that I am a sucker for an obscure set of political entities in a century nobody cares about, like for example the 8th century in in Central Eastern Europe.
So what was it about his perspective or worldview that it was attracting?
Just that combination of a profound curiosity and willing to sort of dig deeper and deeper and deeper and not really come up with an answer. There are great chapters in his first book where he's hanging out with these Hungarian nobility and trying to figure out where Romanians come from, this kind of stuff, and pages and pages and pages, but not coming to a conclusion. So I love that, and just his exquisite descriptive. And I'm nowhere near as good as him, but at least I have someone I can aim toward.
Okay, great. Well, let's kind of get the flavor of the book a little bit by reading a few excerpts.
Okay, and we'll just go through the timeline. So it's chapter 2, Bratislava, February 2011. Light snow is falling on Bratislava again this evening, creating a Muscovite air, but this is Eastern Europe light, a perfect place for an old coot like me to wet his feet without drowning in Slavism. Still, it's not like Prague, an international city. An American grad student I met at our Fulbright Scholars Retreat in western Slovakia's spa town, Trenčianske Teplice, researching how Warsaw Pact citizens during communism really could travel extensively to brother socialist nations, complained he can't practice his Czech in Prague. Every time I open my mouth, they answer in English, he said. Not in Bratislava. Sure, many under 30 in the hospitality trade speak adequate English, but just try it with foreign police and Tesco employees. I became a Tesco tramp, haunting the big French chain for clearance, a partial shit brown stoneware set, Tesco value sheets, towels and utensils, and my slightly classier cook's knife, the Tesco Ma brand. However, all those foreign police do is give you several hours hard time before issuing your work permit, and the Tesco grocery employees just torture you by checking through the next customer before you can load your plastic bags. Slovaks turned out to have golden hearts, I'd learned repeatedly, each time I was about to give up on them. There are scarier points directly east, Ukraine and Belarus. Shouldn't I buy a ticket tomorrow for Minsk? President Alexander Lukashenko has just finished solidifying his third re-election with post-election crackdowns. The Poles are angry. Other EU members are saying that there is no place in Europe for the continent's sole remaining dictatorship, even if it is dictatorship light. And the BBC is now following its Yemen and Jordan follow-ups to the Egypt turmoil with short Belarusian follow-ups, where democracy demonstrations are slowly mounting. Only occasionally do dissidents disappear in Belarus in 2011. The government has happily found that just one or two missing troublemakers sends a meaningful enough message. Maybe I could slip in as a guest lecturer for a couple days, avoiding trouble. Perhaps the Belarusian dissidents and journalists I'd interview would get called in for chats with the secret security police, but I'd be back in Bratislava by then, wrangling with Tesco ladies. Or Ukraine. Their students and intellectuals wanted closer ties to the EU, but strongman pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych wavered and repressed dissent. He took orders from Putin, everyone in Slovakia seemed to know. Some seemed to believe that so did Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, simplistic as that seemed, despite his country's NATO membership. Slovakia was fully stable, but Ukraine, the demonstrations would grow and sputter, Yanukovych alternately wavering and repressing for another couple years. "Ah, Muki!" exclaimed the Hotel Kiev cleaning lady when I described the tiny bugs who'd invaded the bathroom sink the third morning, scampering about my toiletries. She seemed familiar with them, so I felt reassured that she could nudge them elsewhere. But when I asked my new friend Katerina, the front desk clerk, she said Muki are flies. My bugs were tiny crawlers, smaller than ants. Surely they were not baby roaches, I told myself, though they did somewhat resemble the infant roaches I knew in Manhattan during the 1980s. Absolutely they were not bed bugs, because none were in bed with me. Yet. Mravse, the next day's cleaning lady, was equally certain they were ants, though the problem was that neither had seen my morning bugs. Still, both sprayed insecticide storms, sending me coughing down the hall. Katerina believed me, though, and I was grateful. She and the other serious young women working the front desk endured much hallucinatory nuttiness from the Kiev's usual guests, hulking, hungover Brits, or skinny young American guys, or vice versa, here to, quote, enjoy the value, as employee T-shirts urged. 2 decades into capitalism, Slovakia was seeming to offer its famously beautiful women on discount. Stag tours, mostly British, filled Bratislava pubs with guys desperate to meet one, but alas, usually already enjoying too much value from 1.20 euro half-liter beers to accomplish much, even if luck and feminine generosity suddenly coincided. They break the furniture, said Zuzana, Katerina's colleague. Then they complain that it is cheap. It's not very nice, she sighed. Well, those naughty Brits and Americans learned the hard way. In each room was a price list for replacing broken collectibles from the 1970s Slovak socialist paradise. That cardboard thin mirror? 150 euros, cowboy. The wood panel closet doors, eerily like my late uncle's 1960s East Coast den, cost 125 euros each if battered. Some threatened fines seem strange. How wasted do you have to be to smash the big glass ball lights in the downstairs reception with staff watching? Fear not, mate. They were ready to write up the bill even as you cavorted it. 225 euros apiece. Signs listed 3 price categories of, quote, vomit disinfection. During my first month in Bratislava, I walked daily from my Klemensova flat to the Pedagogická fakulta, smiling like a proper American at passers-by, who often glared and ducked away. They probably thought you were mentally ill, my office mate Rado said. Our department head, my age, and a Slovak who admitted nostalgia for Czechoslovakia, we'd go to Prague for the weekend as students. It was our capital. Taught me more. Early on, she brought me to a small university party. In the old days, you could have been assured that among these 18 people, one was an informer, she said. You're nodding.
The other two.
Two. Another story resonated deeply. Right after the Velvet Revolution, she rode out to Devon, west of town on Austria's border, and walked across the line that once would have gotten you shot for crossing. Walked back, then back across again, and back again, repeating, repudiating. Other times I saw how things don't change just because of a revolution. 2 colleagues brought me to a Bratislava City Gallery show celebrating 8 artists banned in the 1980s. I asked, is it possible that some of the same officials who banned this work then are now supervising its celebration? Of course, answered one. They changed the ideology. They didn't need to change the personnel. Younger Slovaks sometimes seem just as cynical. One complained to me about a senior professor taking advantage of her status, summarily canceling classes and responding haughtily to inquiries. I said students should complain to the administration. He laughed ruefully. That won't change anything, he answered. You have to understand how things work here. Maybe in 50 years things will change. No, they won't, I answered angrily. If that's your generation's attitude, you can be sure they'll be just the same in 50 years. Okay. Next one is Chapter 7, Prague Spring, May 2012. Václav Havel was still alive, just barely, when I first came to Prague the spring before, but now he wasn't. I was staying sometimes in a Charles University dormitory in Prague Old Town's Peterska quarter, sometimes in my friend Roman's pension on Uvos in Radchany, right below the castle, finally moving to Palmovka in Prague-8's Liben district, where I have lived in Prague ever since 2013. At the dorm, I had a lecturer's room, slightly better than a student one. Once my Hamburg doctor friend, visiting Prague like a proper tourist, picked me up in a taxi and brought me to stay with her in Old Town's 4-star Iron Gate Hotel. I felt like a male Popelka, the Slavic Cinderella. They don't eat healthily, she said, watching students at the university's Jinonice campus buffet, Wolfdown Parky and Chlebitsky. But their median income is less than half of yours, I said. Her ex-husband's family were Czech Germans, expelled from Prague after World War II. Now a successful Hamburg doctor, he sailed his boat on the Elbe after lunch. All of the money has been made, he had explained, deeply satisfied, when I visited them in Hamburg. I wasn't living so healthily in Prague either, but I had fun. Nightly, I descended from my rooftop room at Roman's Gold Horse house below the castle to U Zawieszeniego Cafe, the Hanging Cup Cafe, with its mix of regulars still there from dissident days and foreign invaders like me. Many tourists didn't make it this far up the hill, so you could establish a sort of regular status, though here was where I first learned how Czechs always keep a distance, how you can never join their inner circles. My dad is exactly like that, one Czech student told me. He'll be friendly to foreigners, he even likes many, but he maintains his sacred little Czech world where they are denied entry. It differed from my backslapping gang at the Round Table in North Portland's Mock Crest Saloon, where if you penetrated the inner circle after a few invitations, you were really in, with all the good camaraderie and bad history accompanying membership. Here I learned fast from some curt rebuffs and reproaches, just presuming to greet the wrong person or joining the wrong table, that with Czechs you are never really in. Once I joined a convivial street party at U Zawieszeniego, a yearly event celebrating its dissident heritage, with people spilling onto Uvos Street and a band playing in a garage across the street. In Portland or Rome, after 2 hours of lingering on the fringes, smiling tentatively at people, I think I would have been pulled into the circle. Not here. When I descended Prague Castle Hill from Roman's Pension via crowded Nerudovo across the Charles Bridge from my school, Prague thrilled me even less. Big Chinese and Russian tour groups jostled with roving bands of Western youth all the way down from the castle, oozing through Malastrana's cobbled alleys and across Saint-Bedecked Charles Bridge to that seething funnel Karlova Street and its chock-full tourist trap Starometsky na Mesti, Old Town Square. Then, though, I found Bar 20 Narodny in Nové Mesto's heart. By now I had 2 more bars, Vinarna Urabala, named after Bohumil Rabal, located where the oddball novelist's house once stood in my own Palmovka neighborhood, and this one smack on Prague's National Avenue, Narodny Chida, yet hidden from it. All I had to do after teaching in Malastrana was walk 1 bridge farther south of the Vltava and cross into Nové rather than Staré Mesto. What a city. One part seduces you and keeps you enthralled before you discover the next one, and the seduction recommences. No other city I know is quite so magical, or perhaps demonic, in its power over expats, especially Americans.
Now I serve the gods of Art Nouveau, Art Deco, functionalism, and socialist brutalism as I walked, stumbling, stopping, bumping, and being bumped, all because some angel or eagle or gargoyle or idealized proletarian hero had stopped me dead in the street from atop its building perch. Is that a good stop, or should I
Sure,
do a
yeah.
little more?
Whatever you want.
I'll do a little more.
Whatever you want.
Okay. For this first half, we'll do two halves. Well, let me just continue along with this one. Late one afternoon, I was studying the facade of Oskar Polivka's Art Nouveau Viola building with its Praha letters encircling the words Život, Kapital, Duchod, Vieno, and Poštuje, life, capital, income, dowry, and insurance. From across the avenue at the Ursuline convent, so incongruous on this lively boulevard, with its statue of St. Agatha holding her severed breasts. Someone bumped and propelled me forward with a brewing crowd through arcades where police beat protesting students in the 1989 Velvet Revolution. I followed the momentum and ducked into Tiny Bar 20 Narodny. Pavel, bassist for Prague's best late 60s, early 70s rock cover band and an airport baggage handler near retirement, was already mellow an hour past work, talking rock and roll. For him it was all Steppenwolf, Deep Purple, Aerosmith, AC/DC. How about Plastic People of the Universe, the underground 1970s Czech rockers, whose imprisonment during hardline communist normalization finally sparked a revolution? Pavel sneered. Those aren't musicians, he laughed. They couldn't even play their instruments. Classic plastics is hard to endure, admittedly, though the instruments allegation should be tempered by the fact that they were denied proper equipment for not towing to Marxism-Leninism. You had to pass a test in its precepts before you were granted a license to buy instruments and perform. In one compelling 1974 video, their founder Milan Lavsa and fellow underground musician poet Pavel Zajacek pound away at makeshift percussion and bass, shouting regime slogans to depict life's dull communist conformity. Sometimes these concerts were broken up by club-wielding STB officers.
Great, thank you very much.
We got another half. We'll do another half after.
I mean, I think that these sections demonstrate the weave of like personal, observational, the journalistic, these conversations that you're having throughout the book with any number of types of people. Which
A lot of drunks.
which are really rich. So I think, yes, it gives a great flavor of the book. I wonder, as I was reading it especially, like, how was it to, because you're working, I mean, at least it seemed from the text, you're working from old journals and notes, but you're kind of narrativizing that for the book. So how was it to like maintain the sort of feel of, say, 2011 and 12, knowing everything that's happened since, and being like locating the reader in that present, but also like not kind of ignoring the fact that, yeah, it's 15 years later. And
that was tricky, yeah, that was sort of tricky. I did have to, because I think like parts of those couple chapters were written within those years, and then sort of toward the, during the COVID time is when I started writing first for Slovak media, the English language Slovak Spectator, and for Prague English language media, and so I started pulling some of those and turning them to articles, and so I already started adapting them. But yeah, I did have to go back. It was tricky, but maybe not as difficult as I worried it would be, to sort of narrativize it and maybe I somehow break some narrative walls, because I think there are places where I say I would learn then that da 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 da. So it was a little difficult, but
yeah, I like those moments, and I like when you refer to you working through the journal notes. Those are really nice sections too.
Oh, thanks.
Because it brings the reader like close to your subject position. And how was it to balance? I think these excerpts give the flavor of it, but to balance this kind of personal memoir writing with like the bigger picture, the historical, the political.
I mean, I kind of knew a little maybe I knew more than most. One of my most powerful teenage memories was crying myself to sleep that August night in 1968 after watching on our little black and white TV in Bridgeport, Connecticut, what was happening in Prague. So I had that sort of sense of where I was, but a lot of it was sort of learning on the spot, and a lot of it was sort of getting chided by some of these Czechs and Slovaks about my ignorance, and sort of educated, and
Yeah, I like those moments when you're kind of confronting someone, when you're hitting up against some of your assumptions and having to sort of justify them or shift them.
Yeah.
Those are really nice.
I bite
personal
back a few
moments.
times too.
Oh yeah, for sure. So
Czechs and Slovaks can be very annoying sometimes. Sorry.
no offense to any member of the crowd here.
But you see, but the good thing about Czechs and Slovaks, you can say that, and they will say, yeah. Whereas Americans, and they're much more annoying, actually.
So I mean, there's a lot of history in this book. Often a pretty deep history, so not just 20th century history, but history going back centuries. And in many of these locations where you're passing through, you're trying to kind of excavate like the origins of the peoples.
That's very Furmore-like, I think.
Yeah, so what was it about that interested you?
Yeah,
Why do such a deep inquiry into
I
the
think
past?
maybe thanks to starting in Slovakia, which as there's I can't remember if this scene is in the book where I got into it with the partner of one of my grad students, former grad student, where I said Czech and Slovak were the same language, and he said nesusteniaci, and and then he apologized for getting angry, but he said, look, you have to understand the Czechs had 1,000 years to build their culture. We're just doing it now. And so it made me want to sort of, and that Slovak effort to sort of, and of course that, sometimes people make fun of their effort to connect to the great Moravian Empire. That made me want to sort of see, well, what's that all about, and to dig deeper into that. And that then it was a domino effect. Well, what about the Poles? What about the Hungarians and their issues with identity? I want to understand where Viktor Orban comes from, for example.
And do you think you got closer to that through this?
I feel like a little. But as I say, my third Budapest chapter, I still really don't know Hungary. I still, there's something difficult about, besides the language.
So what do you think you kind of big picture sort of take away from this exploration of this region? Do you have kind of some epiphanies, or is it more?
For epiphanies, I love it. It's strange being Italian, and I need to get away from it sometimes. And when I go to Italy, and my Italian relatives will say, "What do these people eat?" And then I tell them, and one of my cousins said, "Those people eat to live. We Italians live to eat."
Certainly, there's plenty of eating in the book, and you enjoy eating. So that's
I do.
That's a nice culinary tour. But actually, it's funny because you say that, because when you get to Italy in the book, there is a bit of a tonal shift there. Did you perceive that? Or
it was weird. I suppose part of me was just looking for an excuse to go to Italy for the book, but there was a legitimate argument, because that part of Italy had been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and before that it had been part of that long early medieval development, Friuli and the area around Trieste and that Alto Adige region. They were part of Central Europe, really, because they're, Italy is a very artificial concept too, as our history professors will tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because on one hand, the book kind of utilizes the categories of nation and nationality. On the other hand, it kind of undermines them by showing the intertwining nature and the constructed nature. Did you somehow come to any deeper understanding of the...
Well, I feel like you make me think of something. I end the section on my, right after the invasion, about 5 days after, I went to the Slovak border, the foot border crossing with Ukraine, and I wrote a story for the Slovak Spectator that then got expanded into the chapter. And I got back to Košice and had a meal that was a combination of, Czech, Hungarian, and Polish
influences, and I said something about how, you know, for centuries and centuries these people have the borders have not meant so much. They have I forget the term I use, that they've crossed borders freely, but in a way and that Putin is not doing. You know, it's different, and so it sort of made me feel this sense of a Slavic unity that in the face of the history that the latter part of the book talks about, and this sense that, you know, these national borders are not the final,
Not definitive.
not definitive. Yeah.
Great. Well, would you like to read a
Yeah, I
couple
wanna
of
read some more.
excerpts, and then we'd
Could
like
I-
to take some questions from
Okay.
the crowd.
It starts to get a little. These will be shorter excerpts, but this is this one is set right here at AAU actually. This is chapter 11, Prague, winter 2014. I returned to Prague in January 2014 as barricades and bonfires around government buildings and shouts of revolution grew eastwards in Kiev, Ukraine. Mass demonstrations against pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych and for European Union membership, briefly crushed in late 2013, had erupted with renewed force. Our little private university in Mala Strana had many Russian, Ukrainian, and Russian-Ukrainian students. A small group of Ukrainians shuttled between Prague and Kiev in solidarity with the Maidan democracy movement. I wrote a program for a campus debate that speculated Russia might assist East Ukrainian separatists and seize Crimea, but the young international relations professor running the show rejected it. It's rather sensationalist and polarizing, he said. He replaced it with one suggesting diplomacy must prevail, but tensions remained high at the packed assembly. A little later, on the eve of Russian-stoked civil war in East Ukraine, our Ukrainian and Russian girls joined their tables at the school's International Foods Day to show they were the same people. But one of the Ukrainians told me her father, in the military reserve, had been called to the Eastern Front, and she was terrified. Then she returned to smiling and serving Ukrainian vareniki and Russian pelmeni alongside a Russian girl. I'll keep going. Chapter 21, Prague, The Turn, 2017. I entered Palmovka's Vinano Rabala for the first time in 2017 to a chilly January reception. Something felt wrong. I'd been warmly drunk before with all these Czech ladies and a few men my generation. 2 years earlier, they'd held a, quote, emergency room party, the gang in hospital gear. One was a nurse and had scored real stuff. And when I came, they fake hooked me to an IV and posted wall photos with a story of how I'd come in sick and they'd cured me with alcohol. This time, though, the man at the bar glared, and the lady at the table ranted to the bartender without looking my way. The bartender finally turned to me. "You're back, but we don't like Americans anymore," she said. "This gentleman," she added, pointing at me but speaking to the glaring one, "is an American." I ran my Czech monologue about being an American citizen but 100% Italian. That mollified them. "I take it you don't like President Obama?" "No," they answered in chorus. "Donald Trump?" "Yes." "Is it the refugee problem?" "The Americans and Europeans don't like us," the barkeep said. My heart sank. How strange that after all the high hopes about joining the European community, she saw Czechs, and presumably Slovaks, Hungarians, Slovenes, Croats, and Poles, as different people, once more alienated from Europe. We got drunk together anyway for old time's sake on their cheap Modri Portugal, and I held on to building walls to guide me home as in the days before Trump. But gradually I dropped Vinarnu Rabala, though I still read Rabal. Chapter 27, Prague, summer 2018. Doing okay with time? Okay. One Saturday early afternoon, we walked along the Berunka River southwest of Prague between Radotin and Černošice. We turned a bend, and lo, a summer festival of counterculture hippies was just starting in a grove. What a lovely collection of flowered, long-skirted, and mini-skirted old and some young, a new generation of flower children, ponytailed, white-haired old men and women, but also some ponytailed hippie boys and girls, looking like they'd stepped out of 1967 San Francisco. Now, though, it was a good 3 generations of hippies. I had to join them for a while again. But remember, sir, Czech hippies, proti komunismus.
Against communism, the eldest looking hippie said to me, shortly after slipping a bud of something green and delicious looking to an even grayer tie-dyed veteran as we waited in line for beer. My old Prague dissident friend Oldrich had told me one evening outside Vinoteka Arko in Holešovice that dissidents did have weed, but it was extremely dangerous. The STB viewed it on a par with heroin, equating drugs with the worst Western decadence. Quote, they would have been marginal in any society, Daniel Kummerman once said of some of his old comrades. They didn't want jobs in the socialist paradise, though it was illegal not to have one, and the state would assign you one if you didn't. They wanted to listen to banned Western rock and roll, drink beer, grow their hair long, hang out. Kummerman, who despises not only drugs but Czech's famously heavy beer consumption and has never even smoked a cigarette, nonetheless backed his ne'er-do-well comrades. In a normal society, they wouldn't have been thrown in prison for their lifestyle, he says. Kummerman's crime was collecting American comic books. They didn't take me seriously, though, he says. The secret police would joke, oh, he's the one who likes comics. Am I good with time?
Yeah, okay.
They took the underground plastic people of the universe seriously. The band, formed in 1968 and banned in 1970 under normalization, held 3 concerts from 1974 to 76 that drew as many as 1,000 fans each. Police responded harshly. On March 17, 1976, the STB arrested 27 musicians and other underground members. Most were released, but on September 21st that year, 4 went on trial. 2 members of the Plastics, saxophonist Vratislav Brabenec and Warholish artistic director Ivan Jerus, aka Magor, Mad Fool, intended positively. Sister band DG307 leader Pavel Zajacek and singer Svatopluk Karasek. The initial complaint charged them with anti-socialism, individualism, religionism, Karasek was an evangelical Christian, and Zionism. Some lyrics by poet Egon Bondy, a Czech Jew, had medieval Hebrew references. However, they were convicted of a single reduced charge, quote, organized disturbance of the peace. Zajacek got one of the harshest sentences, serving a year in prison. When he got out, he emigrated to New York City. The state had started encouraging rather than banning emigrations of selected dissidents, and returned to Prague after the 1989 Velvet Revolution, becoming a respected poet and reviving DG 307. But he was broke and in bad health. Around 2013, I'd invited him as a guest lecturer in my class on subcultures, all American study abroad students, and he wouldn't enter the classroom until we paid him his 1,500 Czech crowns fee, about $70 up front. We filled out paperwork in the dean's office, but still the dean's secretary said it would take time for approval, it being after 5 p.m. He stood firm in his refusal. When the dean's secretary managed to scrounge up the 1,500 korunian bills from her desk and handed it to him, he kissed her hand in the old Czechoslovak fashion. Now in 2018, I heard from another decrepit old dissident in the Žižkov bar that Zajacek was in a nursing home, having suffered a stroke. Friends had taken up a collection to help support him. How sad and strange that many heroes of their democratic revolution fell by the wayside like this. Zajacek died in March 2024. Chapter 33, Death and Rebirth in Prague, January-April 2021. Then it all came down. Deep into its massive third wave that made Little Czech Republic first in COVID, as we joked at our resumed online pub, the Pirates Party put a cross in Staroměstské náměstí's pavement for each of the nearly 22,000 Czech dead. Police patrolled tram stops, accosting the maskless, though they ignored the regular drunks who still gathered below the little empty corner lot on Nárazí and Palmovka. The alternative pirates ruled Prague. Andrej Babiš's pro-business ANO party ruled the small towns and countryside. Big protests filled Staroměstské náměstí against masks, Dr. Fauci, closures, tests, curfew, against all of it. Former President Václav Klaus appeared at one of the biggest. No tests, no lockdowns, no vaccinations, kids back in school, signs proclaimed. Klaus tested positive for COVID-19 a few days later. Daily, my faraway American friends announced vaccination triumphs on social media, displaying shoulder bandages and speculating happy about reunions. Some posted selfies at reopened restaurants and murmured about future trips. Meanwhile, my Prague adventure had turned into a gentle but draining house arrest as I approached the end of a third semester teaching online from my little Palmovka studio. By March, many Czech and Slovak friends younger than I had already caught it twice. I avoided them and almost everyone else. The only friend I kept meeting was Vladimira, a soldier, tested every 6 days. But she told me in early April, light seemingly at the tunnel's end, that one of her colleagues had just died. He was a healthy officer in his 60s, like me, who went downhill fast over 3 or 4 days. She showed me small kindnesses after that. We would meet clandestinely, getting svađene vino and beer to go when they started allowing at least that. We drank illegally in the park overlooking Vltavska metro and tram station. You could see the police coming that way unless they came up behind you. We broke rules like this a few times near lockdown's end when beer and wine takeout windows were allowed but no congregating, which Czechs did anyway. They were eager to slide back to normality, a couple steps ahead of pandemic common sense and the rules again. And just one more. Hope I'm not tiring you out.
No,
Go ahead.
absolutely not.
Chapter 41, Eastern Slovakia, March 2022. On Monday, February 28th, my Prague 8 Vinoteca was tense like it had never been previously, not even when the big Serb Sasha and I had discussed NATO's 1999 bombing of Serbia. You walked in and felt it in the close air, already edgy with unspoken pandemic disagreements, and now Ukraine, one country away. What a time. Anichka, our Ukrainian bartender from that country's west, but not the trendy Lviv west, rather the ancient Carpathian west, the land of stateless Rusin people who sometimes despised Ukraine for treating them like second-class citizens, hid in a corner of the bar with her phone. The hard-looking but light-hearted Czech who knew her sat at his usual place near the door. I sat at my table between Radim, who loves the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Václav, who dislikes Germany, both for old reasons. Radim's Slovak wife Anna joined us. 2 older Czechs, a man and a woman, inhabited the bar. Sasha entered. He'd lost his cockiness of the week before, when they had tried to pull me into it, and he defended Russia's right to its Ruski Mir, its greater Russia, just as his nation had demanded so tragically its greater Serbia. The talk had gotten too complicated for my intermediate Czech, but they insisted on my opinion. I just believe Ukrainians have a right to self-determination and democracy, I said in Czech. Sasha smiled dismissively. You're a victim of American media, he said, turning back to the others as if a child had interrupted. Luckily for me, he then apparently took one step too far regarding Russia's friendly assistance in 1968 Czechoslovakia, and the old-timer at the bar put his hands up as if to say, hold it right there, cowboy. Tonight, though, 4 nights into Russia's precision military action looking increasingly less precise, Sasha seemed sheepish, like a bad boy caught. It was okay. We were all humbled, indeed scared, listening to the radio. The radio? Was it 1939? We shushed one another when the report came on with the results of the Belarus border negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Nic, Václav whispered. Nothing.
Thank you. Great. So I'd love to invite people in the audience to ask questions or give some comments to Andrew. Does anyone want to start us off?
Yes.
Joe?
Will I take this?
Yeah, take it.
Thanks. Great book.
Oh, thank you.
Brilliant, yeah. I wonder, were you tempted to write a little bit more about AAU? And were you, I know it's a travel book, but obviously being in Prague is part of the book. So
yeah.
were you afraid of being fired?
No. I almost was a couple times actually. So I was, and actually, like, this is the first school I've ever been at where a dean didn't get rid of me. So, no, and actually, I don't think so. I didn't have more. It really wasn't about my AAU experience, and you know, when I had started, I kind of was just a little bit here and also at Charles in their North American Studies Institute at Nietzsche, and I don't know, I feel like I did, I had AAU in there where it was relevant. I thought it was relevant with that forum. I mean, I hate to say I told you so, yeah. But that, you know, that IRD prof was wrong. Yeah, he was a lot smarter than me about international relations, I'm sure, but he was wrong.
Practice, yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. I am really happy that you did finish it and you did publish it.
Thanks,
because
Monica.
For us Czechs, it's so important to read Tim Garton-Ash or Jacques Rupnik or yourself to see us in a kind of mirror, because we really cannot see ourselves really,
It's normal.
and it's probably normal. So my question would be, why did you stay after all? Because if I was not Czech, originally Czech, I probably would have lived in Paris or London or Dublin or I don't know, but I am Czech, so I have no choice. After 10 years in France, I did return.
Well,
And we do travel a lot with Peter as well to a little bit shatter off this heavy. There's a different atmosphere in Czech lands and in
there is. Well, it's funny. I'm looking at a friend of mine who travels often in Europe, and we once had a conversation because I asked, like, why you always go west and I always go east? Why? And she said, because I had enough east, or we finally can go west.
So what are the things that kept you?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I have a certain stubbornness. And part of it was it just I had run out of options back in the States, sort of. As the introduction explains, I had lost tenure at my university in Portland, and we didn't want to move, and so I was sort of doing what we call freeway flyer, teaching several composition courses at different schools all around the Portland region, and I was unhappy, and so I was really ready for a change, and I had been a Fulbright professor 20 years earlier, as I say, when my career looked brighter, and so we decided. And my wife encouraged me, as she said, just go, you'll be happy. And so I decided to apply for one in Slovakia, because I thought, well, who wants to go to Bratislava, and maybe I'd have a better chance. And we had been to Slovakia, we had visited Bratislava once, and so. It started accidentally like that, and I really fell in love with Slovakia, oddly. And I was not so happy here at first, and I really wanted to go back. I kept trying to get jobs in Slovakia, and my Slovak friends were saying, "Why are you trying? We all want to go to Prague." And I don't know if that answers your question. I think partly a kind of stubbornness, to sort of find out what it was about. And Czechs are really, besides all those somewhat negative things I said, they're fascinating. They're amazing. You have this literary tradition that most of the world does not know about, except for Kafka, and of course that's itself problematic. And as one of those people in Bartłomiej Narodny said to me when she asked me what was on my Intro to World Literature course, and I said, well, I wanted to have a Czech writer, and so I have Kafka, and she said, he's not Czech, he was a German Jew, and so right there was. Yeah. And actually, speaking of being comfortable, in that same bar, the bassist for the cover band, one time he said to me, Andrew, so because I first spoke Slovak here until 2014, hovoril len po slovensky, tak je tu, nebol problém. And he said, Andrew, you're living in Prague, but you speak Slovak. You're an American citizen, but you're really Italian. You're CIA, right? And for about a month he wouldn't let it. And finally I said, "Oh, you're right. I'm CIA. I'm sorry. Don't tell anyone where I'm here. We're trying to help you preserve your democracy. Yeah.
It's a truism that for Czechs, the ultimate social lubricant is alcohol. I'm wondering, could you have done any of this ethnography, any of this?
No. Absolutely not.
So the pub was your.
Not always, but yeah, but certainly here, and it was an entry point and a way to, it definitely is, yeah. And I'm not a big drinker, actually, I should say. I never got so drunk that I had to hold on to the building walls to walk home until I moved here, and so I blame.
We have a question in the back.
Yeah. I have two questions, if possible.
Sure.
In your book, you mentioned many cities, and I'm curious to know what's the most memorable thing from any place you've been Is it the people? Is it the language? Is it the culture? Is it the bars?
No.
Is it the politics of the time? Or is it the hotels or the homes you've stayed at?
Wow.
And then that leads to my second question, which is, without being biased, so you can't answer Prague or anywhere in Italy, but what would be your favorite city that you've traveled within this book?
Within this book, it seems like it's always the last one I've been in, and then I always want to find out about another one. The book several times sort of refers to sort of a lonely I know this sounds like something out of a cowboy movie, but a lonely restlessness. I think that sort of drives me. But I have my new lover. I'm sorry, Mother Prague, mother of cities, as it says in the train station, is Lviv. Yeah, Lviv, and I think that's it is really a wondrous city, and it maybe it's more magical because of the threat hanging over it. I mean, it is. I think it's such a beautiful city, and I say in the Lviv chapter at the end, please, I hope it doesn't get destroyed. And I find it that, and maybe because it's not on the front, but it is the place where you see all the effects of that war. It's full of guys of your generation, missing a leg. With their girlfriends, and you sort of see them living still. Brings tears to my eyes to just think of it. Yeah. I mean, I didn't answer your question really. I live right now. I would say, yeah.
So I know you mentioned that you obviously a lot of people around here, and you spend time with the people in Košice and Eastern Slovak. But do you prefer going around Central Eastern Europe? Do you prefer solo traveling, or do you prefer going with someone, a friend from Ukraine, Slovakia, Czech Republic? Do you prefer solo traveling or traveling with someone native?
I think I prefer solo, but but setting up ahead of time some contacts, which I do. Like right now, I just got an idea from I call him Professor Putin. What he did the other night in Poland, Rzeszów, which I've never been to, in southeastern Poland, and it's I think it's what Podkarpatia region is. 3 of those drones seem to be heading straight for the airport there, which is the main transit point for most of the Western military aid. So if it's not just a one-time thing, Rzeszów seems like a very interesting place to be right now. So I was going to talk to Karen actually about attending the HSS meeting online and going to Rzeszów later next week. But ahead of time, for example, what I would do with that, I'm going to try to contact the mayor's office and try to contact someone at the airport. I mean, this is a special case because it's sort of connected to, who knows, maybe try to contact someone in NATO if that's possible. But basically the story I just proposed to Radek, the school's, I have a wonderful setup now. I basically have a sort of literary agent, Radek Stavel, who is the school's PR guy, places, as he does with you, takes articles I write and gets them translated into Czech and places a lot of them in Czech media. And so this would be, again, sort of like how people in Rzeszów are feeling right now, they're feeling vulnerable. So that would be just, that part of it would be just meeting random people. In some cases, I actually have a personal contact or two where I can say, do you know someone you could set me up with? And I've worked as a journalist a long time, so I'm not sort of afraid of intruding on people's privacy, I suppose, and just asking people who I don't know that well to introduce me to people who I don't know at all.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that's so rich about the book, is that not only are you just traveling and observing, but there is this real serious journalistic quality to many of the chapters, especially with regard to the refugee crisis, the Syrian refugee crisis, with regard to the Ukraine war. Yeah. So it really is a journalistic document as much as it is a travel narrative. In
fact, just before I came back this time for the summer, on my Google Maps, I saved about 50 different vinoteki and cafes that I want to make sure I go to, and some of them were nice, trendy-looking ones. And I know I'll always be a little intimidated by them. I'm always more drawn, like Vinana Urabala, I always called it my first jazykova škola, my language, because it was basically the same 8 to 10 Czechs of a certain age who speak no English. The only other language they know is Russian. They're not going to speak that. So you just had to learn, and they're pretty set in their attitudes and their beliefs and their way, but you sort of get to know them and you sort of learn the complications about them. My gosh, one of them was a lady who was the last person executed in the Czech Republic was a serial killer. It was in the early 90s. She was the one victim of his who didn't get killed, who escaped. And she told, wow, you know, you sort of learn these stories from places that are the little holes in the wall where the same 8 people go all the time. So and somehow, I don't know how I manage it, but I seem to have an ability to, unlike maybe most Americans, to walk into a place like that and sort of wait until someone says something to. That's what happened to Vinano Urabala. Just sort of sat there several visits, and sooner or later, you know, so it takes a little patience. By the way, those of you American students here, I do, you know, recommend going off the beaten path in that way and finding places where the Czechs drink, where the Czechs eat, where, you know.
I mean, one of the psychological dimensions that I was kind of enjoying tracing in the book was this sort of your movement back and forth across the Atlantic. I mean, it doesn't appear that many times, but occasionally it really appears, and it makes a strong impression on the reader because you're suddenly in like a completely different place. You're in Portland, Oregon, you're in the United States, you're at your local bar talking to Americans and feeling a bit alienated or whatever. How was it just living in that way for so long, kind of like going back and forth and negotiating these two completely different worlds?
I still am, but my wife has just retired, so now we're looking at spending more time together here. She's not quite ready to spend, you know, 4 or 5 months at a time here, but I think we'll work her up to it. But it was, and the local bar in Portland, still when I go back, the gang at the round table, the Stammgast there, all, you know, group of guys, you know, my age or a little younger, a few a little older, not like academics certainly, but the first thing that I always get is, so how was Czechoslovakia? And I have to say, guys, there hasn't been a Czechoslovakia for 30 plus years, but for them it's still Czechoslovakia, and I think it always will be. Yeah, so.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, I think we can just chat informally and end the program. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thanks for writing the book.
Thank you.